it would work, and I apologize, but it became very difficult for me to find myself in a room with a functioning printer. Um, First world problem, right? Um, I have a printer at home, and then the ink dries up and in the head of the printer, and I can't clean it. And it's like I buy $100 printer from Walmart. I use it 2 times. I go back to reuse it again, and it won't work. You know, these are what I call first world problems. Corey and I were literally sitting here fighting with the television because we couldn't get the PowerPoint to display properly. And then we got it to display on this screen, but not that one. Then we got it to display on this screen, but not that one. And then we got it back over here, and it's like, I really shouldn't keep us from having a productive Bible study, but it's the world I live in, I guess. So I appreciate this. We're gonna get through 13 and 14. This lesson is going to be a little bit, may seem a little bit disorganized, but I'm going to try to lay the groundwork for a much deeper conversation around chapters 15 and 16. Now, the reason why I want to do that is because I'm going to back up and I'm going to talk a little bit about Daniel chapter 7, which it may be one of the most controversial chapters in the whole Bible. Okay. But I don't want to answer a lot of questions today about Daniel chapter 7. I want to ask some questions. I want to show you some scriptures. And I want you to, over the course of the next couple of weeks, I want you to try to read it on your own and kind of, gain some kind of sense of it and maybe do a little research on yourself, and then we're going to answer that. And the reason I get to do this, the reason I can go out here and tease something in Daniel and kind of address it in chapter 13, but then I'm going to go back and readdress it in chapters 15 and 16 is because there's a theme in Daniel chapter 7 that is going to come up over and over again. And as we go through our lesson, you'll see what I'm talking about. Again, when I talk about parallelism, not to overemphasize this, John is going to sort of repeat himself, but he does it from a different angle. It's like you're looking at the same. If you think of Revelation being a statue, okay, you're going to take a picture of the statue. Well, how are you going to take a picture of it? If it's a three-dimensional image, you're going to take pictures at multiple angles, and that's kind of how I vision, John. He's looking at the end of the world, but he's looking at it through different eyewitness accounts. And the number is 7, of course. So I want to go back and review a couple of verses in the early part of 13 that we purposely glanced over because I was trying to cover the identity of the beast, attaching it to the seven empires that have dominated the history of mankind. The seventh one being very ambiguous, of course. The other 6, we pretty much know who they are, right? We know that they're the 6 different empires that control the Holy Land: Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Greece, Persia. Finishing up with Rome. The seventh head of the beast, we don't really know, but we have a good idea. But it sort of seems to be manifestations of Western civilization, but we don't really want to get into counting horns because it's really this horn is that beast and that country and this horn is that country. We can't really do that. What we walk away with, the takeaway is that the beast is tyranny. It's here with us throughout the breadth of human history. And the second beast, the land beast, is false religion. But there is something in that John alludes to that demands a little bit deeper explanation and cannot be glossed over with such simplicity. Yet I can't say that I'm going to come away and give you an exact definition of what he's talking about with such satisfaction that you'll never question it or that you'll never have more questions about what it might be. And that's this passing reference in 13:3. One of its heads, he's talking about the beast, one of its heads seemed to have a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed. Okay? That something happened to one of the heads. So if the beast is the seven-headed beasts, the seven empires, one of these beasts has its head wounded, but it's recovered. Now, that's not the only passing reference, okay? He doesn't just throw that out there. He goes back to this several times, okay? And they worship the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast. The dragon is Satan, and they worship the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast, and who can fight against it?" Okay. Now, the other beast comes up, and it says it had two horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. Now, I was looking on the internet for imagery. I ran across this. This was so funny, I just had to put it. This person had the seven-headed beast, and they chose a bison as a representative of the beast, which is funny because they didn't even know what bisons were in first century Greece, right? And so I just put there, it's not Harding or Lipscomb. So, I was, random digression, I was listening to Tim Frizzell, a really good friend of mine, preach a lesson. He was talking about, he was contrasting the way bisons and cattle fight a storm. And a cattle will run away from a storm, and a bison will instead turn around and go into the storm, and by doing so reduces the amount of time that it's in the storm. Very clever animal and everything. So I raised my head and said, "Are these Harding bison or Lipscomb bison?" And he said, "I went to Freed Hardeman, so no comment." So I thought that was pretty good. So anyway, you have these two horns like a lamb, and so it looks like a lamb. It looks like virtue. It looks like righteousness. It is a moral code that we want to identify with, we want to obey, but when you actually listen to what's coming out of its mouth, it's falsehood. It's false religion. I mean, that's a pretty good description of what false religion is. And what does Paul say? He says that the devil himself may appear as what? As an angel of enlightenment. Okay? That what you may pursue something that looks to be like righteousness, and it's going to be false religion. Ultimately, the deceit that Satan uses against the world, he wraps his lie in truth. And look at the garden. I mean, everything that he says to Eve is true except one thing, that she will not die. But she does, in a way, become like God. Her eyes are open to what is right and wrong. She becomes sentient in the sense of morality at that point, and she becomes. That's when Adam and Eve sort of, they're not just products of the ground, but they become these spiritual beings that that long to be a part of God, but also fight against God at the same time. The serpent used that deceit to introduce his morality into the world, and we've been struggling with false religion ever since the garden. Now, that's why I really am really cognizant on emphasizing that this false religion is not just one particular person, it's not even one particular force, it is with us throughout the entirety of human history. However, there are certain things, there are certain institutions in the history of humanity that as a Christian, you don't really want to comment about specific institutions, but you have to ask, are they not manifestations of false religion, of what we're talking about? So he says it exercises the authority of the first beast in its presence and makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast whose moral wound was healed. It performs great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in front of people. And by the signs that is allowed to work in the presence of the beast, it deceives those who dwell on the earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that was wounded by the sword and yet lived. So he repeats in verse 14, about this beast who's been wounded yet lives. What in the world is he talking about? And like I said, I'm not going to answer that completely this morning, but I want to go back and look at Daniel chapter 7. Okay? And then we're going to look at 1 Thessalonians 2, because regardless of whether we think these chapters are connected or not, many people do connect them So we have to, if we're going to give a study on Revelation, it's my understanding that when people say we want to study Revelation, that we do not just breeze through the scriptures, but we do kind of address some of the questions and some of the major teachings that are out there and evaluate them. After this I looked, and behold, another like a leopard with 4 wings on a bird of its back, and the beast had 4 heads. Oh yeah, let's see. Okay, no, this is verse 8. I didn't mean to include verse 6. I considered the horns, and behold, he's talking about the beast that has 10 horns. Okay, we've already talked about this in previous classes, so if you're coming into this late, I apologize. But you have this beast that comes up out of the sea. He's got 10 heads. He's not really likened to any particular animal. He's got 10 horns, and he's going to crush everything in his path. He is the beast of iron, and he's got 10 horns. I considered the horns, this is Daniel, and behold, there came up among them another horn, an 11th horn, a little one, before which 3 of the horns were plucked up by the roots, and behold, in this horn were eyes of a man and a mouth speaking great things. Okay, so you have horns here, just like you do in Revelation, just like you do Daniel. He has the eyes of a man and a mouth speaking great things. Now, what is the beast doing in Revelation? The land beast. He's doing what? He's being very blasphemous. And here we have another beast. Another beast doing the exact same thing. So it's likely, John is definitely referencing back. It's very logical. I shouldn't say logical. It's very likely that people are going to associate this false beast, the beast of false religion, with this little horn of Daniel. Now, I told you, I don't really have a good explanation for the 10 horns. Now, some people think the 10 horns are emperors. Some people think the 10 horns are regions of the Roman Empire. And I did point out last week that when the empire fell apart, you could sort of put the Roman Empire into 10 different horns, and it becomes basically the foundation of Western civilization. And these would be the 10 kingdoms. Now the Picts and the Celts, the confusing part about this map, the Picts and the Celts were not really ever a part, excuse me, let me say that again. The Picts were not a part of the Roman Empire, and the Celts in Ireland, where they were pushed out by the Roman Empire, they were not a part of the Roman Empire. The other day I said the Romans were not particularly cruel, and I think my Celtic blood when I got home kind of reminded me, no wait, they kind of were. It depends on who you were, but the Romans were particularly cruel to people that did provoke them. The Celts did do that. And the Romans could, basically committed genocide. I don't know that term genocide gets thrown around today, like, everyone just throwing it around. About half the Celtic population died at the hands of a Roman in 100 BC. So between Sulla and Caesar, the Celts really got annihilated, but they got pushed out. They were not part of the Roman Empire. The point is that these 10 kingdoms sort of could have been the 10 horns. That's one explanation. But other people think it was the 10. There were kingdoms that came after them, not necessarily the kingdoms on this list, but there have been many other kingdoms after that have taken over the Holy Land. There's been 4 different caliphates, and then there's the Ottoman and the Seljuk Turks, and then there's even been the British, and there's been various empires that have taken over that land. You could count it in such a way that you can get to 10, but it's really difficult. You can also count it in such a way you get to 20. I mean, it doesn't. It's really hard to make that out. So I don't really push a particular historicist view of that. But anyway, he mentions this horn. Again, the land beast. Wallace believes that it's Rome. Haley and Shelley believe that it's Rome, but they understand paganism to be the land beast. They understand the sea beast to be Rome. Kaufman and Hendrickson believe it to be all false religion. But let's talk a little bit about this little horn and maybe see if we can get some sense of what the land beast is. Then I desired to know the truth about the fourth beast, which was different from all the rest, exceedingly terrifying, with its teeth of iron and claws of bronze, and which devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet, and about the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn that came up, and before which 3 of them fell, the horn that had eyes and a mouth that spoke great things. Again, he's talking about blasphemy, okay? He's talking about the preaching that's going to come from this beast. It's not just going to be a military power, but he's going to be decreeing a new law, a new religion into the earth, and that seemed greater than its companions. And as I looked, this horn made war with the saints and prevailed over them until the ancients of days came, and judgment was given for the saints of the Most High. And the time came when the saints possessed the kingdom. Thus he said, as for the fourth beast, there shall be a fourth kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all the kingdoms, and it shall devour the whole earth, and trample it down, and break it into pieces. And as for the 10 kings, out of this kingdom 10 kings shall rise. Again, is it the 10 emperors that followed after the first century? I mean, again, how do you count the emperors? Because there have been lots and lots of emperors. If you limit it to, some people say if you count the 10 emperors, it covers the first 10 emperors to about the time that John wrote Revelation, if you believe that John wrote it in 98 AD, which I have a hard time with that too, given that John would have been so old, and it's pretty obvious, or some of this seems to be reflecting on an earlier date, because he's talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. So there's a lot going on here, a lot of moving parts. So it's kind of hard to nail down. Not to mention 10 kingdoms. It could be an individual king over 10 different lands. We don't know, but we do know that Daniel says, and another shall rise after them. He shall put down. He shall be different from the former ones. He's kind of a king, but he's not. And he shall put down 3 kings. Wow, interesting. Okay. Now, unlike a lot of the other visions of Daniel doesn't really go back and explain it much further than that. Now, I don't have a lot of slides to talk about this. I want to make a quick digression. There is, how many people have heard of Antiochus Epiphanes? Anyone? Okay. There's a lot going on that I haven't really talked about the Greek Empire, but there is a preterist interpretation of Daniel. And when I say preterist, let me specify it's an uninspired preterist version. In other words, it's people that do believe that it's talking about what's going on with the current events at the time, but a lot of people that do not believe in the inspiration of the Bible want to pick up the book of Daniel and apply everything that Daniel says, not to Rome, but to Greece and the empire that came after them. After the Greek Empire falls apart, there were 4 heads. It fell apart in 4 pieces. It was specifically divided in 4 pieces. That one's a lot easier to nail down. Okay, so you have these 4 regions of the Greek Empire, but this over time there was a lot of warring that goes back and forth. It is explained in detail in Daniel chapter 10. It talks about the queen of the north and the king of the south. Now, that is out of scope for this class, but it is remarkable, the detail that Daniel goes to. And if you pick up a commentary, Daniel's commentary or Kaufman's commentary of Daniel is really, really good about explaining step by step all the prophecies of that chapter and how they were fulfilled. But a lot of people want to say the little horn was Antiochus Epiphanes, which was a particularly vile tyrant that attacked Israel. I think it was 2nd century BC. I'm blanking on the date there. They want to call him the little horn. He hated the Jews, and he even sacrificed a pig on the altar in the Second Temple. Now, the reason why people want to steer us towards that explanation of Antiochus Epiphanes being the explanation of the little horn of Daniel is because we've got copies of Daniel that we know that even the scientists, even the historians of the secular world who have no love for Christianity or anything religious, they know that these copies predate Christ, that they come before the first century. They are written, the paper itself is dated in the 2nd century BC. We've got copies of Daniel. Now, that's a problem, right? If you're trying to say that all the prophecies of Daniel were really just explanations of history that had already happened, and he's writing it as they're saying the Jews are fooling everyone. They wrote it as a prophecy and make it look like a prophecy, but it's really just this weird apocalyptic satirical writing of current events that they don't want really people to understand, but they know what they're talking about because they can talk about politics without the pagans and the secular non-Jewish powers understanding. Right? It's like hidden political speech, right? That's what they say Daniel was. And to do that, they've got to put all those events into the 2nd century. The problem is they don't make sense. It doesn't line up. And again, it's out of scope for this class, but Antiochus Epiphanes is not the little horn. The little horn generally has been interpreted as, and I'll just go ahead and say this, and people may disagree, and like I said, we're not going to answer this question this morning. We're going to push this off future classes. A lot of people think it's the Pope. Okay. Now that man in Rome that we may see on Channel 8 every year giving the midnight mass, we really don't care what he says, and he, who knows what he says. He says a lot of things that seem to be very contradictory to me, even today. He's always in the news, and he's very controversial. The current one is, but I'm not talking about the current one. I'm talking about the papacy. Okay, and now I'm not going to say that the little horn is a pope. I'm just saying that people are saying that the little horn is the papacy. Okay. This is not some bizarre theory that I grabbed on the back page of the internet, okay? It was the common held belief of many Protestant leaders for, through centuries of human history, and even before that. I mean, you can go back and find plenty of writings that predate the Protestant movement, because there have been a lot of people that have been at war against the papacy. Now, to say that, let me draw a distinction that your neighbor that went to Mass this morning, okay, should not be equated with Alexander VI or Julius II or Innocent III or any of the papacies. The papacy, and I'm going to use the word papacy and not the whole Catholic Church, because there is a difference between there's a difference between the power structure that is corrupting religion and all the people that say they believe in Christ. Okay. It doesn't work like that. God, there's no membership card. I can say I'm a member of this church, I'm a member of that church, and I suppose that God in His righteousness will decide if we have fellowshiped correctly. But what I'm trying to say, it wasn't as clear cut as we might think. That if you were in, 13th century medieval England, okay, you didn't have a choice, right? There was a building down there at the end of the road, and it was a church building, and you went there and you listened to people talk, and if you didn't like it, you didn't really, you could go to your home and you could worship God, and I hope you knew how to read, because a lot of them didn't. And if you did, it's just not, it's just not clear cut to say, okay, this person was a member of the Catholic Church and that person was a member of this church and that. That's not how membership worked. Okay, you can say that. And the other thing is, like, I go back and you look at Revelation, and you talk about this, the church at Sardis, and how evil the church of Sardis is. When the church is just deeply evil, and it's involved in all kinds of sexual immorality and false religion, and Jesus is like, I want to destroy it. But then he turns around and says, but there's some people that are fine. There's some people that, there's some people that are not defiled, that haven't defiled their garments. Well, what does he say to them? Does he tell them, okay, go down and create your own church or create your own congregation? He doesn't mention it. Now he doesn't say don't do it, okay? But what I'm saying is that people are in situations when they're trying to worship God and worship God correctly. Fellowship is very difficult. Okay, it's very difficult to draw the boundaries sometimes. Okay, now I come here because I believe that we worship God properly. I believe that the doctrine of this church is good, so I chose to come here. I have choice. In fact, I've got about probably 2,000 choices in Davidson County alone. Okay, but I come here. A lot of people didn't have that choice in the crux of human history. And it's just, when you don't have that choice and you're being forced to attend a congregation that you don't like, and you don't even have the tools to really read the scripture yourself and understand it and preach it, it can be a very lonely, very difficult existence. So when I talk about, if I slip up and say the Catholic Church, I'm not talking about your neighbor. I'm not talking about my neighbor who prayed for me when I was sick last year. I'm just not. But obviously, I think that we all have to strive to obey God, and that there are certain rules that He has ascribed to us. But we're all struggling with false religion. There's this beast that is just trying to pull us away. Now, the Catholic Church, the papacy, I should say, has to be kind of called out specifically, because it doesn't mean anything to you, because 400 years ago, your relatives got on a boat and crossed the ocean, or maybe it wasn't 400 years ago, maybe it was 100 years ago, and maybe you came over here, and he's just an afterthought. He's just not an issue. But it's not like, if you think he's just a man with a funny hat on TV, that's not what history has told us, right? There was a fight. And that fight lasted a long time. Now, let's go to 1 Thessalonians, another chapter that's very controversial. I said 1 Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians, I apologize. Now, concerning the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our being gathered together to Him, we ask you, brothers, not to be quickly shaken in mind or alarmed, either by a spirit or a broken word, or a letter seeming to be from us, to the effect that the day of the Lord has come. They are looking for the day of the Lord. They are looking for the return of Jesus. Let no one deceive you in any way, for that man will not come unless the rebellion comes first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction, who exposes and exalts himself against every so-called God or object of worship, so that he may take his seat in the temple of God, proclaiming him to be God. Do you not remember that when I was with you, I told you these things, and you know what is restraining him now, so that now that you may be revealed in his time. For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains it will do so until he is out of the way. And when the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord Jesus Christ will kill with the breath of his mouth, and bring to nothing by the appearance of his coming. The coming of the lawless one is by the activity of Satan, with all power and false signs and wonders, and with all wicked deception for those who are perishing, because they refuse to love the truth and so be saved. Therefore God sends them a strong delusion, so that they may believe what is false, in order that all may be condemned who did not believe the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. People are going to connect the little horn of Daniel to the man of lawlessness, and they're going to connect it to the false beast. Okay? Now, I've set it up. I'm going to tease it. I'm going to answer those questions later and engage in further discussion. I'm going to just give you an example. This is Isaac Newton. Okay, you hated Isaac Newton in college because of this thing called calculus. Okay. He was a great scientist, but he actually wrote many more religious treatises than he did science. He was one of the most prolific writers of the 16th century. I should say 17th century, excuse me. The little horn is a little kingdom. It was a horn of the fourth beast. Now again, this is an example of someone who believes this. And I thought Isaac Newton's pretty down to earth, so I want to get his opinion. And rooted up the first horns, and therefore we are to look for it among the nations of the Latin Empire. In other words, what Isaac is saying, we know that the fourth beast is Rome. Therefore, it had to have occurred within the Roman Empire. Okay, but it was a kingdom of a different kind from the other 10 kingdoms, having a life and a soul peculiar to itself, with eyes and a mouth. By its eyes it was a seer, and by its mouth speaking great things, and changing times and laws. It was a prophet as well as a king, and such a seer, prophet, and king is the Church of Rome. Okay, and the Pope, again, we think of him as a man with a funny hat. He used to have a kingdom. Okay, again, how do you talk about the three horns? There were three kingdoms uprooted and became what we call the Papal States, and there was the Emilia-Romagna in the north, which is oh, you can't see my mouse, but it's this northern region, and then that solid purple is the Marche, and then the Latin region is down there in the southwest. And so Isaac Newton is pointing that out and saying, hey, he did this. I mean, they took three provinces and combined it, and it became the Papal States. Another thing that people throw out, and I don't agree necessarily believe this either. I'm just saying that this is a common belief that you need to be aware of. In 538, Justinian dislodges the Ostrogoths out of Italy. Okay, Ostrogoths are one of the pagan kingdoms. If we went back to that map, if we scroll back up to the map, I'll just do it real quick. The Ostrogoths had taken over Italy in the 5th century. And then Justinian dislodges them, and he replaces he puts the guy by the name of Vigilius as Bishop of Rome, in power in Rome. Okay, and the Christian church at the time was evolving, and it began to ascribe more and more power to the Church of Rome. Fast forward to 1398. This is a date that they use. I think they're cherry picking, but I'm just again showing you an example. Napoleon deposes Pope Pius VII. Okay, took his power away, took his kingdoms away. Now he does keep a smaller section of Rome for a while, but these are the bookends that people use to talk about the power of the Catholic Church. Okay, these are two very significant events. Now, some people argue that Vigilius really didn't have a lot of power, but he was there. He was put there by Justinian, who knows, and the power of the Pope did not end in I said 1398. I apologize. That's I'm going to do one thing real quick. I want to correct that. I don't usually correct my PowerPoint in the middle of a lesson, but I'm going to do it now because it won't make sense if I don't. Okay? 538, 1798. What is 1798 minus 538? 1360. I don't think I believe it, but that's what a lot of people argue. Okay? The issue here is that you can find other historical events and put dates around them, and it's very difficult for someone to come in and say, oh, you're right and you're wrong. It is interesting. Okay? And so when you talk about the 1360 years, that there was a 1360 year period. Now, if you want to go back to the 19th century, when you had people in the 19th century in the United States of America creating all kinds of crazy beliefs and going out into the wilderness, and eventually you see it manifested in Jehovah's Witnesses and other doctrine and stuff like that. Why did they believe that? Why did they do that? Why did they think that the world, end of the world times were coming? It's because they believed in those dates. They thought the Catholic Church has been defeated recently. In their memory, they had a good working memory of it. That was the tangible history of, that they had in their hands. They saw the collapse of the Catholic Church. That's why they thought the end times were coming. And they saw America, and they were surrounded, and people were coming to God, and there was this rebirth of religion, and everyone was coming back to God, wanting to be baptized, wanting to be reborn. They were like, well, look, 1360 years, the papacy has been defeated. Everyone's being reborn in America. The only problem with that is they only had an American perspective. And look, we're still here. And we're way past that, the 1798. Way past it. So again, you can't use the dates. You can't play games with the dates there. Going on to Revelation 14, I'm going to just go ahead and kind of stop here. I meant to get to this today, but we'll get this covered. Revelation 14 is not a very difficult chapter, in my opinion. I wanted to explain the horn of Daniel. I wanted to explain the man of lawlessness, get that planted, because we're going to go back to this in a couple of weeks. Next week we'll talk about Revelation 14, and then Scott Huff will teach. The week after that he'll teach Revelation 15. I'll be out of town for 1 week, and that'll be good. Y'all be like, that's 1 week we don't have to listen to Joel, so we get a break. So I've got to go to Virginia. So, but we'll go ahead and pick up Revelation 14 next week. Any questions or any comments? Did I confuse you? Did I? I hope not. But anyway, those chapters, I'm going to answer the questions that I've asked this morning. I apologize that this lesson seemed discombobulated, but I had to lay the background for that. Okay? And I'll have handouts next week. Okay? Thanks.